GOATQuesters. Why am I drinking alone, which is always dangerous? Because the beer man is lost at sea. He came down with an illness. I'm not going to get into the particulars. That would be disgusting. But the beer man is not going to be with us for this little mini episode, this little holiday treat of a GOATQuest episode that I'm about to deliver for you. And we need a treat. We need something sweet because the bitter taste in our mouths as Detroit Lions fans is a little bit, let's just call it curse-ish. The curse of Bobby Lane may be creeping up from the grave once again. I know that we all wanted to believe that Peyton Manning and Jeff Daniels expelled that curse from our lives with the little shenanigans they pulled with the bathtub full of whiskey at Ford Field, but it doesn't seem to have happened. It wasn't the Butcher's Cut bourbon, number one, from the Detroit Whiskey Factory, the Detroit Distillery. That might have been the first problem, but I think the more important problem is the massive list that is the injured reserve for the Detroit Lions. And I know Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn have tried to cover up these weaknesses. It was nothing short of a miracle what they were able to accomplish against the Green Bay Packers with 6 of the front 7 out for most of that game as far as the opening day starting lineup was concerned. And I know that this time of year, it's well known that you don't play with your first string throughout an NFL season. You're going to have to weather injuries, but at some point, it just becomes ridiculous. And at some point, you do start to wonder if you're cursed, because when you look at the linebacking core, and this is the particular hemorrhaging issue for the Detroit Lions defense, Jack Campbell's the last starter left, and he graded out very poorly in this game against the Bills. Jack Campbell, a second-year pro with strong side and weak side linebackers next to him that are not first string, that are not second string, that are third string and practice squad. Right? These are Quan Alexander was on the street. Lions brought him in off of practice squad. Ezekiel Turner, Neiman, backup third string, backup from the Chiefs. David Long, who actually played a nice game, he actually graded out fairly well, is another guy who's really a third string linebacker. You can't win against the high-powered Buffalo Bills offense, led by Josh Allen, James Cook, outstanding running back, a whole plethora of mechanics and plumbers that do their jobs with Kincaid and Knox at the tight end position, and Shakir, and they've got some big play threats there, but really Josh Allen is the straw that stirs the drink. He's the run-pass option, and the Lions had a lot of difficulty handling him. Still, final score 48-42, and when you looked at the back and forth of that game, shockingly, it was Amon-Ra St. Brown who had a wonderful game, but made the 2 mistakes in that game that did not allow them to offensively keep pace. He had the fumble, obviously, big turnover, can't turn the ball over against a championship caliber team. But then he also dropped the big third down that would have kept a drive going and kept them right in a 1-score game. Once it became a 2-score game and the defense couldn't keep pace with Buffalo, that's where Dan Campbell decided at 12 minutes to go to run the onside kick. I know there'll be a lot of criticism about that. I fall into the John Gruden camp on that one. I don't know if you saw John Gruden talking on Barstool, but he said, look, there was no stopping that Josh Allen Bills offense. There was nothing to make Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell believe that they were going to stop them on any of those next successive drives. So going for the onside kick was more of a stop the bleeding for a moment motive for the defensive coaching staff and for the head coach, Dan Campbell. when you look at it, of course, they didn't expect Hollins to pick the ball up and take it damn near into the end zone. They would have expected the ball to be recovered right there at the 40-ish yard line, and okay, we're going to play defense again on half of a field. That would have been a much better situation than the one they ended up in. Hindsight is always 20/20, and the Lions further dig a hole for themselves after the onside kick to try to dig themselves out of, which admirably they did put together a run there at the end. So again, we look at these injuries that precipitated this. The linebacking core, Anzalone is out. Hopefully he can return by the end of the season. Derek Barnes is probably out for the year. Malcolm Rodrigo is out for the year. Reeves Maben hasn't played. I mean, the second string guys are out. Nowaski, the Saginaw Valley State kid who had played so well in a reserve role, was out with a concussion. Hopefully we can get him back. So these aren't the first stringers. These are the second stringers that are out, which is what puts guys on the practice squad right into your starting lineup. That's not going to play in the playoffs. Have to figure out a way to cure this. And now we add to that injury bug Aleem McNeil, our best defensive lineman, David Montgomery with an MCL tear who's out for the season, and Carlton Davis, who might make it back with a broken jaw that he's also going to need surgery on. McNeil and Montgomery will go under the knife soon. It's not a death blow, but it is a serious blow. I'm not going to play this overly dramatic symphony of sympathy for the Detroit Lions because look at the San Francisco 49ers. There are teams across this league that are decimated by injury, and the Lions are going to have to find a way to persevere here. So let's look at the rest of that league and how it shapes up. The National Football League's NFC has Philadelphia now. Most people are picking them now with the injuries to beat the Lions. They're on an epic run right now, 10-game run behind them. Oh, and by the way, both 12-2 now, so they're tied with the Lions. But the Lions have the home field advantage on the tiebreaker for their excellent record within their division. So beyond the Philadelphia Eagles, you've got the two teams in the North. Minnesota, also with the same 12-2 record. Lions will get a chance to settle that in the final home game of the season. And the Green Bay Packers, who the Lions have beaten twice, but again, the Green Bay Packers look very, very good, and they're going to be a difficult out in the playoffs. They've got a lot of tools. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are getting healthy again. The Los Angeles Rams with Matthew Stafford spinning the rock are once again in the playoff hunt. And then Washington, the Commanders, probably a team that you look for next year, but they seem to have that final playoff spot in good position for the wild card. On the other side, we just saw the Buffalo Bills, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, but their defense, highly suspect. 42 points they gave up. I mentioned the St. Brown turnover and drop. J-Mo dropped a bomb. Lions did not play perfect offensively, and they scored 42 points. So Buffalo's defense is suspect. Kansas City Chiefs just keep on winning. They got the best record in the NFL. Mahomes finds a way. Spagnola's defense is outstanding, and if they maintain this one-loss season, you're going to have to go through Arrowhead. That'll be a tall order for Josh Allen and anybody else. Tomlinson's got the Pittsburgh Steelers playing great football. Mike Tomlin is an outstanding coach. Russell Wilson is playing better and better. They lost, however, to Philadelphia in a rough and tumble game that had a lot of extracurricular activity. But again, Philadelphia puts themselves on a pedestal by beating an excellent 10-win team in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Houston locks up the South. The Texans, if you can't beat the Lions when they throw 5 picks in your own building, I'm not worried about the Texans. I am worried about Baltimore. Still legit. Still the best running game in the NFL now that David Montgomery is out for the season. I look at Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and the rest of that Baltimore team as very dangerous in the playoffs. I definitely think that they can beat the Bills and the Chiefs. And then the last two teams to fight there is the Denver Broncos and the LA Chargers. Again, two teams probably teeing it up for next year. If I have to be honest, Peyton's done an amazing job there with the Denver Broncos and Harbaugh with the Chargers, but they're probably a year away. So that's the NFL complexion from a playoff perspective. I'm going to tell you the quick Detroit Lions story that I want to put into focus because it has a family connection for me. My grandfather, great football coach, great football mind, Catholic leaguer from Old St. Joe's. In his adulthood, after college, after he always coached youth football, but he was a car salesman. He sold Cadillacs, which was a great job to have in Detroit, Michigan, back in the 1950s and 60s. And we lived in a neighborhood with, as I've mentioned before, Yale Larry and Joe Falls, the sports writer. That was our family neighborhood. My grandfather had drinks with these guys at the local bar on a regular basis. He sold Cadillacs to the Detroit Lions executives and automotive executives and the players like Yale Larry. He sold a car to one of the executives of the Lions, and as the legend has it, the executive saw the promo that they had done at the car dealership with Bobby Lane. This was common at the time. NFL players didn't make a ton of money. They did promotions with car dealerships and banks and other businesses. And my grandfather said, yeah, it was a great promotion. It did really well for us. We're going to renew it for next year. And the guy says, well, you might not want to renew it for next year, which was a big red flag. I mean, this was during the season. This was the year that they traded Bobby Lane in 1958 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And my grandfather immediately called Yale Larry. Of course, this executive never assumed that the car salesman that was selling him a car was friends with Yale Larry. And Yale came up and he told him what the executive had said. He made a phone call in a phone booth right across the street, as my grandfather would tell the story. And it set off a whole barrage of phone calls to management and are we going to trade Bobby Lane? And of course, the veterans loved Bobby Lane, even with Tobin Rote and the backup quarterback who had won the 57 championship when Bobby Lane was hurt. There was still a big wave of discontent over this move. And of course, Bobby Lane famously or infamously curses the Lions, whether or not that actually happened. Even Bobby Lane himself said it wasn't true before he passed away. But the cursing of the Lions that they'll never win the Super Bowl again, and now in a year where they seem to have had everything aligned, all the cosmic tumblers were set up just perfectly with a great Lions team and a great coaching staff. And sure enough, the turf monster jumps up. The ghost of Bobby Lane trips up this team with multiple injuries in the key fourth quarter of the season. And it begs the question, what do we need to do to dispel this curse? I've talked about taking the old Detroit whiskey factory, the Butcher's Cut bourbon, down to Lubbock, Texas, to the grave of Bobby Lane, and actually respectfully sharing a drink with old number 22 to finally come to Jesus on this curse and eradicate it once and for all forever before the Lions take this final 3-game run into NFL history. Needless to say, your Detroit Lions are 12-2. Big applause. 12-2. This is the best team of my lifetime, regardless of injury. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to get the high water mark of carries. Jared Goff is going to have to carry this thing. We're going to have to see that same consistency out of the offense. They're going to have to score a lot of points, and the defense is going to have to get healthier. With Carlton Davis out, they're going to have to plug in the rookie Rakestraw, maybe move Robertson over from the nickel. Mosley and Vildor are going to have to fill in the blanks in that defensive backfield, and they're just going to have to play great football. Terry and Arnold's going to have to grow up and become the shutdown corner that we know he can be, and we're going to have to hope we get some help, get some guys healthy, and get some help. But that's the plight of the Detroit Lions, and that's my story for what I think needs to happen, both supernaturally to kill this curse, and then pragmatically the way that they're going to have to manipulate the defense. They're probably not going to be able to play as much man-to-man. They're going to have to play to their talent and figure out some disguises of man to the two deep zone, play some man free and find a way to cover their man defense better. Teams use motion to identify man, and the Bills did it very well. Other teams have done it well against us. So we're going to have to counter that by truly being able to play some two deep zone. We have the best safeties in the game. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph are going to have to carry the mantle of some more responsibility, and we'll see if they can do that. Your Detroit Lions are not out of it. I see a lot of people on social media saying, that's it. Montgomery, Davis, McNeil can't weather that storm. Turn the boat around and get ready for next year. No, sir. No, sir. This team is 12-2, and it has the best offense in the National Football League. When you've got an offense that can score on every possession, you're in every game. You can beat anybody. They just need to get a few stops, and they need to balance the defensive game plan with the talent that's going to be on the field. And we'll see exactly how Aaron Glenn decides to do that this week, coming up at Soldier Field and throughout the holidays. We've got to go out to San Francisco, get our revenge at Levi Stadium for that terrible comeback victory that we allowed the 49ers in the NFC Championship game, and then the year ends with the Minnesota Vikings coming into Ford Field. Hopefully by then we're a little healthier. So that's my pause into the college football playoff. This is a first. A 12-team playoff given birth by your NC double assholes that have turned in the NIL and the portal, and now I don't know who the hell's playing quarterback for any team in a bowl game, and I got a bowl game that's sponsored by Pop-Tarts and another one that's sponsored by Depends, and I can't find my ass with both hands when it comes to the gambling or the picking of winners due to these portal-based lineup shifts. So I'm going to stop crying about it and give you a little bit of the what for in upcoming games. I actually do have to compliment the bowl committees. They put together some really interesting matchups. And I'm not talking about the playoff. These ancillary bowl games do have some pretty cool matchups that, again, I don't know who's playing for these teams, so it's going to be difficult to know who's sitting out and who's already wearing another team's jersey. But I do think they did a nice job in matchups, and when Tom's back, we'll dig into those as we get closer to the new year. But for the playoff itself, the playoff opens on Friday night. They're not all Saturday games. Friday night, the 20th, Indiana will go into Notre Dame. It will be very cold. It will be very cold in South Bend, Indiana, if it's anything like any other late December in northern Indiana. Signetti the Sorcerer against Freeman. These guys have done two of the best coaching jobs in college football this year. Signetti for coming in and changing the culture 180 degrees and radically shifting the fortunes of the Hoosiers. And Marcus Freeman for weathering a debacle of a loss against the Max Northern Illinois early in the season to really roll it up the rest of the way. But he has not played the schedule that you would have hoped. Of course, they got the nice win against Texas A&M. And Indiana hasn't played much of a schedule. They got the nicest yellow brick road of Big Ten schedules that you could imagine. And Ohio State handled them pretty well. So when they've faced a high-powered team, it hasn't been as easy as they hoped. So when we look at this game, Notre Dame's -7. I think that's about right. If I'm picking winners, I think this game will be very close, throughout the game. I think that Notre Dame with Riley Leonard, the savvy quarterback, and the running game with Jeremiah Love will end up proving its merit in the fourth quarter. I think you put those big bodies on Indiana the same way that Ohio State did, and in the third quarter it'll start to wear out, and in the fourth quarter that investment pays dividends, and I think the running game wins out. I think it's right about on the number, 6 or 7 points. Of course, when you got a very competitive game, I like to take the points. Indiana's getting 7, but I like Notre Dame to win the game at right about that number. We go into the noon game, the noon kickoff on Saturday. That is the Clemson Tigers, who got in by winning the ACC championship game in that shootout with SMU. They're playing Texas in Austin, and this one I think is your route. I think Texas will take out their frustrations by not getting a bye and not being able to handle Georgia for a second time in another great nip and tuck ball game that went down to the wire. I think you see Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning, maybe both of them, getting run in this game, and a real walkover for Texas. The 11.5 points that they're giving Clemson, in my opinion, is too few. I think they'll win this game by 2 touchdowns, maybe 2 touchdowns and a field goal. So I would safely put a check mark in the Texas Longhorns column in the noon kickoff. Oh, I'm sorry. Texas and Clemson are the 4 o'clock game. The noon game is SMU and Penn State. So I'll take this one in reverse. I love the way that SMU came back and fought back to make that game close and put Clemson on the watch list there. SMU's the 11 seed against Penn State, the 6 seed. We know that Penn State has certainly struggled against top clientele whenever they have faced Michigan, Ohio State, and now Oregon in these top-seeded games. They have faltered. I don't think they falter here. They are an 8.5-point favorite, though, and I'm taking the points. I do think that, again, this one, SMU will show that same pluck. They'll be right in the game. This could be a field goal game either way going down the stretch. That home field advantage for Penn State in these first-round games will bear out, and Penn State, I'm saying they get a win by 3. And then that final game, the night game, is the big one. The Horseshoe will be rocking in Columbus, Ohio, as the Tennessee Volunteers come in. You got state senators trying to bar people from selling Ohio State tickets to Volunteers fans. You've got people making memes of the Wolverine helmet being painted all orange, and Tennessee coming in and using psychological warfare against the Buckeyes. Let me tell you something. If Josh Heupel thinks he's going to come in and make this a track meet against the Ohio State Buckeyes, he's going to have a rude awakening, because the Ohio State Buckeyes have a track team in their starting lineup. You do not want to go blow for blow, wide open offensive game against the Ohio State Buckeyes in the Horseshoe. You do what Michigan did. That's the way to beat them. Control the ground game. Make it nip and tuck. Raise the stakes by playing close to the fest defense. Bend but don't break. Stiffen up in the red zone. I have a feeling that Tennessee is going to try to air it out, and I think that this will become an offensive shootout. And I do think that with Smith and Egbuka and Travion and Judkins and Will Howard, I do think the big names come out, the stars shine bright at night, and that 8 o'clock game will go to Ohio State. They are -7. Could Tennessee come back? I think it'll be probably a 10 to 14 point game. Ohio State will be linked. Could Tennessee come back and get a score and create a push at the end? Yeah, it's tough to give 7 points in a game like this, but if I had a gun to my head, I would say Ohio State Buckeyes by 10, maybe 11. So I'm going to get Pete the Greek, who has all the inside information. Pete the Greek Katos a Wayne State stud football player to send in his picks to GOATQuest. He's got all the insight. He's in the equipment room. He's got equipment managers on speed dial. He's got scouts. He's got the athletic trainers, the physical therapists. He's got all the inside people at all these universities on all these campuses, and he's going to come and deliver us the picks. We might have to steal his picks from Nate Bush or somebody else in the Wayne State family because he doesn't like to go public with them because, this is his stock and trade. This is how he sells these picks for hot money. So we might have to steal Pete's picks and compare them to mine.
Hey, yo, Pistol, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, man, I'm looking at these games, and I need some winners, bro. It's Christmas time.
Great year, SMU, no doubt about it. Pulled it off. The dream ends as much as, and I hate Penn State, and that Franklin, he's a bum too. But you know what? How they always say, Mr. Bush, the sun's got to shine on a dog's ass once in a while.
Every once in a while.
Give me Happy Valley and the Penn Staters.
Disgusting.
It's a nitty day. Unfortunately, they cover, they win.
Tennessee at Ohio State. OSU given 7.5. Over under 46.
Josh Heupel looking more like a hippo lately. The fat bastard. He's going up to Ohio State. And he's got to go see Day.
You got to go see Blackbeard the Pirate.
I mean, you spend $20 million on a team. You think you could beat somebody.
They're giving Tennessee 7.5, right?
I see this game, honestly. It comes down to the quarterbacking. I just can't see Ohio State. I'm on the hype train, baby.
Yeah, I like.
Let's take the Vols. I take the Vols, and then I make Columbus think about Day as a coach. He blows this one in the first round. He gets bounced in the first round.
Pittsburgh at Baltimore, dude. Baltimore is given 6.5 to Pittsburgh. Over under 44.5.
The weather and definitely the under. These are two traditional defensive teams. They don't like each other.
They know each other.
Telling me, I take the points. Russell's not that bad. You take the points.
Hell yeah, 6.5. That's a lot, bro.
The Steelers still like to run the ball, control the offense.
You're giving Tomlin You're giving Tomlin 2 field goals ahead.
he's just. I mean, you got 2 good coaches. I mean, how could you give 6? Take the 6.
Yeah.
You got to go with the Bucs. They're gonna knock out the Cowboys. Cowboys needed some teams to lose and get in. My sources tell me this is it. Tampa all the way. Take that over 2. Baker is good for 35 to 40 points a game.
Bang.
The 4 teams in the college football playoff that are waiting in the bye week. Arizona State is waiting on the winner of Clemson and Texas to play in Georgia at the Peach Bowl. This is where all those 6 New Year's Day bowl games come in. The Peach Bowl will become the game between Arizona State and the winner of Clemson and Texas. The Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all in Pasadena, will be Oregon waiting on the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, that 8 o'clock showdown at the Horseshoe. Oregon, number 1 team in the country, the only undefeated. Dylan Gabriel did not win the Heisman. Travis Hunter, congratulations to Colorado's 2-way player, played 400 more snaps than anybody else in college football. He was a top 5 receiver. He's a top 5 corner. I mean, come on. I know Ashton Genty had a record-breaking year, but it wasn't record-breaking against Barry Sanders because he played more football games than Barry Sanders, played more football games than a lot of guys. You give me 15 games, 16 games, of course you're going to break a record for a guy who played 11 or 12 games. Stop it with the record. It's not a record. You got to go by the same number of games. Make it fair. But Oregon and Dylan Gabriel are waiting in Pasadena for the winner of that Tennessee-Ohio State game. In Arizona at the Fiesta Bowl, it's Boise State. They won't have the Smurf turf from Idaho. They'll be waiting at the VRBO Fiesta Bowl, which is the one game that's not played on New Year's Day of these 4. That's a New Year's Eve game at night. That one might go into 2025 if it goes late. It's a 7:30 start on the East Coast, but that New Year's Eve game will pit Boise State, the 3 seed, Mountain West Conference champion, against the winner of Penn State and SMU. Interesting. I think that's the easiest road to the championship game, to the semifinals, I should say. The Sugar Bowl in New Orleans, or in Nolans, is going to be the Georgia Bulldogs, SEC champion, 2-time winner against Texas, waiting for the winner of Indiana and Notre Dame. Either one of those teams, Indiana or Notre Dame, could give Georgia and Carson Beck tons of problems. I know Georgia looked great against Texas both times. But Georgia's not what they were in years past, and that offense is highly inconsistent. So an interesting Sugar Bowl on the horizon. That's the late game on New Year's Day. And then, of course, the last 2 bowl games are the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl. Those will be the semifinal games. Those will be played on January 10th. Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami and the Cotton Bowl in the Dallas, Arlington, Texas area. And then we wait on that championship game, which is all TBD, but it's going to be played on January 20th. So that's your college football look. Who do I think is going to end up there? Well, I got to go with how I started this whole debacle of an NIL portal, figure out your collective's money situation season. I started out by saying Texas and Oregon. So, if I had to play this out again, then the way that it will work out is that Texas and Oregon could play each other in the semifinals. They will not face each other in the finals. So if the Cotton Bowl is Texas and Oregon, I'm going to take that as a victory. And I think it is going to be Texas and Oregon in that Cotton Bowl. I have a sneaking suspicion that your upset special might take place with Notre Dame and Georgia. I'm going to go out on a limb right now, and I'm going to say yes. Notre Dame beats Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, gets to that Capital One Orange Bowl semifinal, and I believe that semifinal will be played against Penn State because I don't think Boise State defensively is ready to win the Fiesta Bowl. I think Penn State squeaks through against SMU. I think they squeak through again in a 3-point game against Boise, another tight game. And then whether it's Georgia or Notre Dame, Penn State gets shellacked in the semifinals. But I do think it's going to be Notre Dame by 1 point. I don't know how it's going to go down exactly, but I had a dream where the Fighting Irish with the gold helmet prevailed over the Georgia Bulldogs, whose defense I love. Love Georgia's defense, but I just have a sneaking suspicion that Notre Dame gets back into national relevance in that semifinal game and then beats Penn State and goes to the championship game against Oregon. And I'm staying with my original pick from day one preseason. The Oregon Ducks will be your national champion in a great football game against Notre Dame. They're going to beat them by 6. That's it. That's the picks. That's all I got for you with the CFB. That's the bracket. I took you all the way through the finale. We'll see what Tom Beer, we'll see if the Beer Man has anything to say about that when he gets here and arrives for our next episode. Of course, we picked the Detroit Lions and I picked the Detroit Lions and the Baltimore Ravens to be in the Super Bowl. Tom Beer picked the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know if he wants to go back on that now that the Bills have been so hot down the stretch, or even maybe if he wants to go back on the Detroit Lions. He's an alum. He would know. Can they weather this storm? We got to get his feedback. Our next episode, our tandem episode to this one, goes into boxing because you got big fights on the horizon with Fury and Usyk Part 2, the heavyweight championship. So we're gonna have Frank Garza, the Hall of Fame referee, come in. He's going to give us his insights. Talk a little bit about the Kronk Gym and its rebirth in Detroit and everything that's happening there, all the great news. So we've got a lot to come here in the near future. I told you my Bobby Lane story. I told you that we got to get the butcher's cut into the green grass around the grave of Bobby Lane so that he's fully satisfied and that we can dispel this curse once and for all. This has been a marginally broadcasted, a mediocrely produced, and I shouldn't say that about Johnny. He's a fantastic producer. It's never mediocrely produced. It's expertly produced. It's mediocrely presented by me in many cases. But hopefully I've done a serviceable job without my wingman, the beer man. He'll be back, and we hope to see you next time. Until we're back, we're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, if you care to actually watch the podcast. We're on Apple and Podbean. You can find us on all the platforms. And we always hope that you are out there in the world becoming the GOAT at whatever it is you're doing today.